Hey Beholding fam, my name is Rachel and I'm so grateful to be sharing with y'all this Friday. We are in the book of James and we're going to look at James chapter 1. James is written by James, the half-brother of Jesus, and he's writing to a group of Jewish Christians who are experiencing very real suffering and persecution. James would then go on to give his own life for the sake of this beautiful gospel. And it's this James who is writing to us about trials and temptation. So let's look at the text. I'm going to read for us from James 1, verses 2 to 4. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet various kinds of trials. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. When we talk about trials, it is hard. I experience tension in my own self because trials aren't the thing that we want to go through or the thing that we want to talk about. But often it's in trials that God is shaping and forming us. Paul writes saying that God's will for us is our sanctification. He longs for us to be formed and conformed into the image of his Son. And so you can view, or we can view together, trials as a pathway to maturity. Let's look at verse 3. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And so we want to ask the question, God, how are you forming me in this moment when we're walking through a hard season? And that can look like a lot of different things. It can look like walking through sickness. It can look like walking through death or loss in your family, academic problems, not seeing where you want to be in life. Like the last 2 years, I've asked the question so much of God, where are you? What are you doing? How are you trying to shape me in this way? Because it's been a hard season. And so we want to ask the question of God, how are you forming me? How are you shaping me? We want to ask the question, God, how are you making me more like Jesus? Because we know that trials will come. They're inevitable. The call to be a follower of Jesus is often and is very much a call to suffer. And so we want to be asking, God, what are you doing in this way? And the other thing about trials is that they actually help us be consciously aware of our need for God. Let's be honest, the South Asian American dream, we work really, really hard so that we can have really good things in life. And it's often not until something goes wrong that we remember where God is and what he's doing. But in trials, it's not often that we turn our eyes to God and we say, wow, you're so great. But actually, we ask the question of God, where are you? Why is this happening in my life? How could you allow this to happen? Here's the reality. God is always at work. He's always inviting us to be closer to him and forming us. It's just that sometimes it takes suffering to get our attention. And so I want to invite you to ask the question of all the time, God, where are you? How are you inviting me to be aware of who you are and what you're doing? And so I want to invite us to look through this lens, knowing that God is maturing us and forming us into the image of the Son, that we would cling to him, that we would look to him all the time, not out of our own hands. James goes on to talk about temptation. And in trials, we can experience doubt in a very real way, where we can question, God, are you even there? Do you exist? Are you actually powerful? And that's human. Our own flesh cannot fathom the vastness and the goodness of God often. But it's in that space of doubt and unbelief that we can actually ask Jesus to help our unbelief. This is what we see in Mark 9. This father asks, I believe, help my unbelief. And so we ask God to form our belief, to strengthen our faith in Jesus. And it's not about how much we have, but it's who our faith is in. And that is in this beautiful person of Jesus. The other thing that can happen as we're tested is that we can start to feel entitled of God. So-and-so is doing really well. How can you allow this to happen to me and they're doing okay? And it's in that space that we can forget the beauty of how God is at work in everyone's life, that the redemptive work of God is present in everyone, and even in trials, that God is doing a redemptive work in us. It's in this space that we might be prone to become the master of our own lives, to reject God's sovereignty, God's lordship over our lives, that we can say, God, I know better, and so let me do this my way. Whether that's in our desires and we see that God isn't meeting our desires, and so we choose to pursue our desires in a different way. God, and this is a very real conversation, particularly as I work with college students. Like, God, I'm choosing, you're not giving me a relationship or this thing that I want with other people. So I'm going to go and fulfill this desire and longing that I have in a different way. Or God, you are not meeting my desire of wanting to have a profession that meets you in this way. And so I'm going to take the back door and do something else. And so I think there's an invitation for us to also remember who Jesus is, that he is Lord of all things. And so if Jesus is Lord of all things, how is he Lord still, even when we are experiencing trials and we are tempted to choose our own way? And so I want to leave us with that. But as we are in trials, or even as we might experience temptation, I want to invite us to point our eyes and our gaze towards Jesus, who is the author and perfecter of our faith. He is good and faithful and true, and he was worthy of all of it. So blessings, friends. I hope this was a gift to you, and have a great weekend.